March 2020. A virus with no name most people can pronounce, no vaccine, and no cure is tearing across the United States. Hospitals in New York are running out of beds, and in a drugstore outside Cleveland, a woman stands in front of an empty shelf, the exact spot where the little purple bottles used to sit. Sold out in the next store too, and the one after that. Across America, people are stripping pharmacy shelves bare of a syrup pressed from a wild berry, betting their family's health on it. In a matter of weeks, sales jump 150%. Searches for one word spike higher than they ever have in history. Here's what nobody in that checkout line knows. The largest, most careful study ever run on that berry had just wrapped up, and it found the berry did almost nothing. And the company that sold it to them, by law, they never had to prove it did anything at all. This is where it begins. Forget the pandemic for a second. To understand why millions of Americans bet on this berry in a crisis, you have to go back. Way back. Not hundreds of years, not thousands, more than 10,000. Dig into the mud at the bottom of an ancient lake in Sicily, and you'll find it. Elderberry pollen, buried in sediment carbon dated to roughly 10,800 years ago. Dig through Stone Age settlements in the French Alps, Bronze Age villages in Tuscany, prehistoric sites along the Black Sea coast. Same story. Elder seeds, elder wood, elder charcoal, left behind by people who had no written language, no metal tools, no wheel. Put that in American terms. People were using this plant for more than 10,000 years before the United States existed. That's roughly 40 times longer than this country has been a country. When the pyramids were still 1,000 years from being built, somebody was already boiling these berries. And here's the strange part. In its raw form, this berry can make you sick. The elder is a scrappy, fast-growing shrub with hollow, pithy stems and flat white clusters of flowers that explode into drooping bunches of tiny berries. So dark purple they look almost black, small enough that a dozen would fit on a dime. Crush them fresh and your fingers stain a deep wine color that won't wash off for a day. But eat them raw, straight off the branch, along with the leaves and stems, and you're in trouble. The green parts and the unripe fruit carry cyanogenic compounds, natural chemicals that turn into a mild dose of cyanide in your gut. Nausea, cramping, vomiting. So somebody, somewhere, thousands of years before chemistry existed as a word, figured out the fix. Heat. Cook the berries, and the toxin breaks down. Simmer them into a syrup, ferment them into a wine, and the thing that could make you sick becomes the thing that makes you feel better. That was hard-won knowledge, passed hand to hand across 100 generations. The same kind of patient, life-or-death trial and error that turned a poisonous weed into food. Nobody wrote it down. They just knew. Think about the patients that took. No thermometer, no lab, no way to explain why heat mattered. Just a rule handed down like scripture. Never eat it raw, always cook it first. Get it wrong and your family spends the night sick. Get it right and you've got a jar of dark, sweet medicine that keeps for the whole winter. That's not superstition. That's chemistry, discovered the hard way and remembered for 10,000 years. By the time the ancient Greeks and Romans were writing things down, the elder already had a towering reputation. Hippocrates, the man they still call the father of medicine, reportedly called the elder tree his medicine chest because you could treat so much with it. The Greek physician Dioscorides prescribed wine made from elder root for snakebite. Egyptian healers used elderflower on burns and skin. This wasn't a snack. To the ancient world, this was a pharmacy that grew by the roadside. Now here's the piece the modern world completely forgot. The elder wasn't just medicine, it was magic. Those hollow stems. Punch out the soft center and you've got a natural tube. Perfect for a flute, a whistle, a pipe. The plant's scientific name, Sambucus, likely comes from the sambuca, an ancient stringed instrument built from elder wood. For thousands of years, across Europe and later across Native America, this was the tree you made music from, the tree of song, and it was guarded by a spirit. Across Northern Europe, and especially in Scandinavia and the British Isles, people believed an entity lived inside the elder tree. The Danes called her the Hylde-Moer, the Elder Mother. And you did not just walk up and cut her branches. If you needed elderwood, you had to ask. Out loud. There was a rhyme spoken to the tree, begging permission before you took a single stem. Cut without asking, and the Elder Mother would follow you home, haunt your sleep, curse your family, or make your furniture bleed if you were foolish enough to build with her wood. And the Elder had a dark side to match the light. Plant one by your door, and it kept witches out. But in the Middle Ages, the story flipped, and the same tree got tangled up with the worst betrayal in the Christian world. One legend said Judas hanged himself from an elder. Another said the cross itself was cut from elder wood. So depending on which village you stood in, this was either the holiest protective plant you could own, or a cursed tree you'd never bring inside. People burned it to ward off evil and feared it as the devil's own timber, sometimes in the same breath. A plant powerful enough to save your life was, in the medieval mind, powerful enough to damn you. Nobody was neutral about the elder. Picture it. A village healer at dusk, hands already stained purple from the day's work, kneeling at the base of a wild elder at the edge of the woods, whispering to the tree before she cuts, then carrying the berries home to simmer over a low fire while the whole house fills with a dark, jammy smell, the smell of medicine and safety and winter survival. That was elderberry for most of human history. Not a product, a relationship, a wild plant that grew for free, healed the poor who couldn't afford a doctor, sang, and demanded respect. Nobody owned it. Nobody sold it. It belonged to everyone and no one. That was about to change, because a berry that heals for free is a problem for anyone who wants to sell healing. Before we go further, if you're new here, this channel covers the hidden histories behind the things that shape the world. Real stories, real numbers, no filler. New video every week. Hit subscribe so you don't miss it, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Whether you're in Texas, New York, or somewhere in between, I always want to know. For most of history, elderberry stayed exactly where it started, in the hands of village healers, farm wives, and the kind of country people who knew which plant did what. In England, they had a saying: the elder was the medicine chest of the country people. Free medicine for folks who had nothing else. The knowledge lived in the hands of the poor, and mostly in the hands of women. The wise women, the herbalists, the ones professional medicine would later push aside and write out of the story entirely. Then the 20th century did what the 20th century does. It took something free and turned it into a business. The turning point came in the 1980s and 90s in a lab in Jerusalem. An Israeli scientist named Dr. Madeleine Mumkwoglu developed a standardized black elderberry extract, the same folk medicine, but measured, bottled, consistent, and patented. She called it Sambucus. And in 1993, she got the chance to test it in the real world when an influenza outbreak swept through an Israeli farming community. The results turned heads. She tested the extract in the lab against a whole lineup of flu strains, including one nasty strain of influenza B that was tearing through the community, and found the elderberry compounds could actually grab onto the virus and block it from breaking into human cells. That's the mechanism that made scientists lean in. Not folklore, but something you could watch happen under a microscope. Then came the human test. In a small placebo-controlled trial during that outbreak, people who took the elderberry extract seemed to shake the flu faster than people who took the fake. A follow-up study in Norway in 2004 put 60 flu patients through a proper randomized, double-blind test, the gold standard, and the elderberry group reported their symptoms clearing on average about 4 days sooner than the placebo group. 4 days. That's the difference between missing half a work week and missing a full one. That's the number that launched an industry. Now be honest about what that was. A couple of small studies, a few dozen people each. Promising, but thin. In science, that's a starting line, not a finish line. It doesn't matter, because a starting line was all the marketing departments needed. They had two things Americans love: an ancient origin story and a study they could point to. Traditional wisdom, backed by science. That's the whole pitch. and it worked better than anyone dreamed. Watch how fast this empire grew. In 2015, Elderberry ranked 25th among herbal supplements sold in mainstream American stores. 25th, a nobody. By 2018, it cracked the top 5, and in 2020, Elderberry became the single best-selling herbal supplement ingredient in mainstream US retail, grocery stores and drugstores, with more than $275 million in sales in a single year. That's a 150% jump in 12 months, and sales had already been doubling every single year since 2018. From 25th place to first place in 5 years, built on 2 small studies and a very old legend. So who paid for this? Not slaves in a field, this isn't that kind of empire. But there's a cost here, and it lands in 3 places, and you're standing in one of them. Start with the quiet theft. The knowledge that built this business wasn't invented in a lab in Jerusalem. It was borrowed from 10,000 years of village healers, from the wise women who kept it alive for free, from the exact people who never saw a dime and got written out of the story so a bottle could carry a trademark. The medicine chest of the poor got a barcode. Then there's the danger the industry doesn't advertise. Remember, raw elderberry can hurt you. In August 1983, in California, a group of people made juice from fresh wild elderberries and threw in the leaves and the stems for good measure. Within 15 minutes of drinking it, 11 people got sick. Nausea, vomiting, cramps, dizziness, numbness. One man drank 5 glasses and ended up in the hospital, stuporous. It remains the only elderberry poisoning outbreak the CDC has ever formally recorded. And to this day, there's not a single documented death from the berries of the black elder. Cooked right, it's safe. But that 1983 warning is a reminder that this is a real plant with real chemistry, not a candy, no matter how the gummies look. And that's the third cost. The gummies. Because when demand exploded, supply couldn't keep up. And that's when the fraud started. Quick gut check before we go on. How much money do you think Americans spent on elderberry supplements in a single year at the peak? Not the whole supplement industry, just elderberry. Drop your guess in the comments. The real number's coming, and most people lowball it badly. Here's the supply problem. America barely grows its own elderberry. When the boom hit, roughly 95% of the elderberry in American bottles was imported, most of it from Europe. Demand was a fire hose, supply was a garden hose. And whenever that gap opens up in any industry, the counterfeiters move in. Watchdogs at the American Botanical Council issued formal alerts that elderberry extract was being adulterated, cut with cheaper ingredients, other dark berries, dyes, anything to fake that deep purple color that makes a buyer think antioxidants. So some Americans, paying premium prices for immune protection during a pandemic, were literally buying colored water dressed up as medicine. And the scale of what people were buying is staggering when you actually stop on it. At the peak, Americans spent more than $275 million on elderberry in grocery stores and drugstores alone, in a single year. That's not counting Amazon, not counting the vitamin shops, not counting Whole Foods. Just the mainstream shelves. $275 million on one berry, driven by fear, riding on a science that could barely fill 2 pages. If you guessed lower than that a minute ago, you're in good company. Almost everybody does. That's the human cost, American style. Not chains, fraud, borrowed wisdom, and a bottle that may not contain what the label swears it does. Here's a fact that surprises almost everyone. Elderberry is an American native, not just European. A cousin species, the American black elder, grows wild across this country, from Nova Scotia down to Florida, out through the Midwest. Long before any European bottled it, native peoples across North America used the berries and flowers as medicine and hollowed out the same soft stems to make flutes and whistles. The tree of music here too. So why is 95% of our elderberry imported? Because America almost never grew it as a crop. That's only now changing. And the whole American elderberry industry basically fits in one state. Missouri leads the entire country in elderberry production, with only a few hundred acres in the ground. A few hundred acres. That's smaller than a single mid-sized corn farm in Iowa, and yet it's enough to make elderberry the #1 berry crop in the state by value. The story of how it got there is almost comically small scale for a plant this famous. Around the year 2000, researchers at the University of Missouri's Center for Agroforestry started studying whether this wild native shrub could become a real crop. A grower named Terry Durham bet his farm on it, planted some of the first commercial elder around 2005, and launched a brand to sell it because he knew farmers wouldn't grow what they couldn't move. The federal government, the USDA, finally put serious grant money behind American elderberry in 2021. But here's the punchline. Even now, demand so badly outpaces what our farmers can grow that growers say they raise their prices every year and still sell out, and the shelves stay stocked almost entirely with European imports. Think about that gap. The best-selling herbal supplement in America is a plant we barely bother to grow, sold on the strength of studies done overseas, to a public that has no idea any of this is true. For a while, none of that mattered. The 2004 Norway study made elderberry look validated. Sales climbed every year. The story sold itself. Ancient cure, modern proof, buy the gummies. Everyone believed the science was settled and the worst was behind us. It wasn't, because a pandemic was coming that would put this berry to the ultimate test, in front of the whole country all at once. And when it did, everything the science had quietly failed to answer was about to get exposed in the harshest possible light. What I haven't told you yet is what the people selling you elderberry right now already know, and have known for decades. By law, they can't promise it does a thing, and by law, they never had to prove it does. One more before the hard part. If a plant that's been lying to you for 10,000 years is your kind of story, hit subscribe. This is exactly what this channel does every week. March 2020 hits, and elderberry has its moment. The whole country is terrified. There's no vaccine, and Americans go looking for anything that feels like protection. Searches for elderberry spike to the highest level ever recorded, right after the World Health Organization declares a pandemic. The fifth most common search alongside the word elderberry that year. Elderberry coronavirus. People weren't buying it for the flu anymore. They were buying it to survive COVID. Here's the part that should make you angry, though maybe not at who you'd expect. There was no good evidence elderberry did anything against this virus. None. 0 published human studies on elderberry and COVID-19. The government's own National Center for Complementary and Integrative Health said so flatly, and some immunologists raised an alarm that ran the other direction entirely. They worried that elderberry, which revs up certain immune signals called cytokines, might actually make severe COVID worse by feeding the deadly cytokine storm that was killing people in ICUs. That fear was never proven, but sit with what it means. After 30 years on the shelf and millions of doses sold, the experts couldn't even agree on whether this stuff helped or hurt in a crisis, because nobody had ever been required to find out. The companies knew the ground was shaky, so did the government. The FDA sent warning letters to at least 5 companies in 2020 for illegally marketing elderberry products as COVID treatments or preventives. But warning letters are a slap on the wrist that arrive after the money's already been made. And the biggest, best study ever done. It's the gut punch. In 2020, the same year sales hit their all-time peak, the Cleveland Clinic published the largest, most rigorous elderberry flu trial to date. 87 patients. Randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled, the real deal. The result, elderberry did not shorten the flu. It did not reduce the severity. It did basically nothing. The best science we have said it doesn't work. The best sales year in history happened anyway. Read that twice. The best science said it doesn't work, and it became the #1 supplement in America in the very same breath. So how is that even legal? How does a product sell $275 million in a year while the strongest study says it does nothing? One word, DSHEA. In 1994, Congress passed the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act. To the people who voted for it, it was a small technical adjustment to how a few labels worked. This decision seemed small at the time. It was not. That law is the whole scandal, sitting in plain sight. Under DSHEA, supplements aren't regulated like medicine. They're regulated like food. Which means a company does not have to prove a supplement works before selling it. They don't even have to prove it's safe. The burden flips entirely. The FDA can only pull a product after it's on the shelves, and only if the government can prove it's dangerous, after people are already taking it. A supplement company can put Elderberry gummies on the shelf at Walmart tomorrow and write, "Supports immune health," right on the label, and that's completely legal, as long as they slap on a little disclaimer and don't use the specific word, cure. They never showed the FDA a single study. They never had to. There's a whole game hidden in the wording. The law lets companies make what are called structure-function claims, vague, feel-good phrases like supports immunity or promotes wellness. What they can't legally say is that the product treats, prevents, or cures a disease. So watch the tightrope. Supports immune health is fine and requires no proof, while prevents the flu would suddenly demand the evidence of an actual drug. Same berry, same bottle. The only difference is a few carefully chosen words, and which side of that line the marketing department decides to stand on, and the science underneath, genuinely muddy. A 2019 research review pooled the small studies together and concluded elderberry looked helpful for cold and flu symptoms. A year later, that bigger, tougher Cleveland Clinic trial said the opposite. That's not a settled science being suppressed. That's a thin, contradictory pile of evidence that was never strong enough to justify a #1 bestseller in the first place, held up by a legend and a law instead of by proof. That's the machine. Congress built it in 1994. It guarantees, by design, that the marketing will always run decades ahead of the science. And elderberry is the perfect product for that machine. An ancient story people already trust, a couple of thin studies to wave around, and a legal system that never asks the hard question. Americans now spend tens of billions of dollars a year on supplements, almost none of which have been tested for whether they actually work. Elderberry is just the one that dressed up in 10,000 years of history and walked out of the store as #1. The berry didn't lie to you, the system did. And it's still running. DSHEA passed in 1994. The best trial came back negative in 2020. That's 26 years, and counting, of Americans buying a promise nobody was ever required to keep, while you paid full price. So where did all of this land? In your medicine cabinet. Walk into any Walmart, any CVS, any Costco, any Target in America right now and you'll find it. Usually an entire section of it. Purple syrups, purple gummies shaped like little bears, lozenges, teas, capsules, immune shots, Sambucus, Nature's Way, airborne with elderberry added. A dozen store brands. At its peak, elderberry moved more than $275 million a year in mainstream stores alone, climbing from 25th place to first place in half a decade. And it's still one of the best-selling herbal supplements in the country. It's grown on a few hundred acres in Missouri and shipped in by the ton from Europe. It's sitting in the gummy bottle in your bathroom right now, next to the toothpaste. It's the thing your coworker swears by every time the office gets a cold. It's probably in someone's cart at a grocery store within a mile of where you're sitting. A wild shrub that a Stone Age healer whispered to before cutting is now a barcode on aisle 7. Here's the thing the whole story finally reveals. And slow down for this one. For 10,000 years, elderberry was free. Poor people processed a mildly poisonous wild berry into medicine through nothing but patience and hard-won knowledge, and they gave it to their neighbors, and they asked the tree's permission first. Then we took that knowledge, ran 2 small studies, wrapped it in a legend, and sold it back to ourselves at a premium, under a law that made sure nobody ever had to prove it works. That's not really a story about a berry. That's a story about how a lot of America gets built. Take something old and trusted, add just enough science to sound legitimate, and let a law written in a boardroom's favor do the rest. The gap between ancient wisdom, proven by modern science, the thing on the label, And we honestly still don't know. The thing in the research, that gap, is where the whole industry lives. And you were never told there was a gap at all. So here's the real question, not about elderberry, about your whole medicine cabinet. How many of the things on those shelves are there because someone proved they work? And how many are there because someone was simply allowed to sell them before anyone bothered to check? Let that sit. Have you ever bought elderberry, or any supplement, because it felt like it worked, or because a bottle told you it would? Be honest, drop it in the comments. I read every single one. If this is the kind of story you want more of, the real history behind the things that quietly run your life, subscribe. Hit the like button. It genuinely tells me you want to keep going deeper. And share this with someone who thinks they already know how the world works. Because here's the last thing. The next time the weather turns cold and you reach for that little purple bottle in the medicine cabinet, the one that promises to protect you, you'll remember that people have reached for this exact berry for 10,000 years. You'll remember they whispered to the tree before they cut it. And you'll remember that the one thing nobody ever had to prove was whether it works at all. That berry outlived every empire that ignored it. The only question left is whether it's medicine, or just the oldest best told story on the shelf. You'll never look at the gummy aisle the same way again.